The gunshot echoed across the Montana prairie, sending a flock of startled ravens into the crimson sunset sky. Zara Thornwood ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs as another bullet splintered the wood near her head. This wasn't how she'd imagined her journey west would end, pinned down by bandits, miles from civilization, with nothing but a nearly empty pistol and the bitter taste of regret. Montana Territory, 1876. The land of opportunity, they'd said. A place where a woman could outrun her past and start anew. What cruel joke that had turned out to be. Zara checked her revolver, 2 bullets remaining. The bandits had already killed her driver and the other passengers. She was alone, as she'd been most of her life. Peering cautiously around the wagon's edge, she counted for silhouettes approaching through the golden prairie grass. "Come on out, lady," called a gruff voice. "We just want whatever valuables you got. Might even let you live if you're nice about it." Coarse laughter followed. Zara knew what nice about it meant. She'd rather die fighting. A thunderous sound suddenly split the air, not gunshots, but hoofbeats. Many of them. The bandits turned, confused, as dust rose on the horizon. A group of riders approached at breakneck speed. "Trouble coming," one of the bandits shouted. Zara seized the moment of distraction to aim and fire. Her bullet found its mark in a bandit's shoulder. He screamed, dropping his weapon. The approaching riders were closer now, 5 men on horseback, led by a tall figure on a midnight black stallion. The bandits scrambled, firing wildly at the newcomers before fleeing toward a nearby ridge. The riders didn't pursue immediately. Instead, the lead horseman dismounted near the wagon, approaching with his pistol drawn but lowered. "Madam, you still alive in there?" The voice was deep but gentle, with a hint of a southern drawl. Zara kept her pistol trained on the shadow approaching her hiding spot. "Stay back. I've got 1 bullet left, and I won't hesitate." The man paused, then slowly holstered his weapon and raised his hands. As he stepped into the last rays of sunlight, Zara saw a rugged face framed by sandy brown hair under a wide-brimmed hat. His eyes were a striking blue against sun-bronzed skin. "Name's Blake Calloway, madam. Me and my men were tracking those outlaws when we heard the gunfire." He gestured to the riders behind him who were checking on the other bodies. "Looks like we're a bit late for the others." Zara lowered her weapon slightly, but didn't put it away. "They came out of nowhere, shot the driver first, then picked off the others when they tried to run." "You held your ground," Blake observed, a note of respect in his voice. "Most would have panicked." "I faced worse than backwoods thieves," Zara replied coldly. One of Blake's men approached. "Boss, no survivors except the lady. Those were Silas Reeves' boys, for sure recognized Red Pete before they ran off." Blake nodded grimly. "We'll catch up to them. First things first." He turned back to Zara. "We've got a ranch about 3 hours' ride from here. Can offer you shelter tonight before we escort you to town tomorrow." Zara finally emerged fully from behind the wagon, her once fine traveling dress torn and spattered with dust and blood. She stood tall despite it all, her auburn hair tumbling from what had been an elegant coiffure that morning. "I have little choice, it seems. But know this, Mr. Calloway, I can handle myself, and I expect to be treated with respect." Her green eyes flashed with a defiance that took Blake by surprise. "Wouldn't dream otherwise, Mississippi?" "Thornwood. Zara Thornwood." Blake's expression changed subtly, a flicker of recognition crossing his features before being quickly masked. "Miss Thornwood, let me help you onto my horse. We should leave before those bandits return with reinforcements." As Blake helped her mount, Zara felt a strange combination of wariness and relief. His hands were strong but careful, and despite her situation, she noticed the clean scent of leather and pine that clung to him. The group buried the dead quickly but respectfully, gathering what belongings they could salvage from the wagon. As they rode away, Zara seated before Blake on his stallion. She wondered what fate awaited her at the end of this journey. She'd come west to escape whispers and pointed fingers, only to find herself dependent on the charity of strangers once again. What she didn't know was that Blake Calloway had his own reasons for being interested in a woman named Thornwood, reasons that would soon entangle their lives in ways neither could imagine. The Calloway Ranch spread across 5,000 acres of Montana Territory's most fertile land. As they crested the final hill, Zara caught her breath at the sight below. A large main house of timber and stone stood proudly against the backdrop of distant mountains, surrounded by various outbuildings, corrals, and grazing cattle that stretched as far as the eye could see. "Welcome to Broken Creek Ranch," Blake said, his voice close to her ear. "It's impressive," Zara admitted, unable to mask her awe. "Built it from nothing 6 years ago. Was just me and 2 hands back then." There was unmistakable pride in his voice. "Now we're the largest operation this side of the Yellowstone." As they approached, people emerged from various buildings: ranch hands, house staff, and a slender woman in her 60s who waited on the main house's porch with an air of authority. "That's Mrs. Peterson," Blake explained as they dismounted. "She runs the household. Fair warning, she rules this place with an iron fist wrapped in a dishcloth." The older woman hurried down the steps, her concerned gaze taking in Zara's disheveled appearance. "Lord above, Blake Calloway, what trouble have you brought home now? Bandits hit a stagecoach. Miss Thornwood here was the only survivor," Blake explained, helping Zara down from the horse. "Mrs. Peterson. She'll need a room and some clean clothes." The housekeeper's stern expression softened immediately. "You poor dear. Come with me, we'll get you cleaned up and fed properly." Zara hesitated, glancing at Blake. Despite just meeting him, he represented the only familiar face in this new situation. "Go on," he encouraged gently. "Mrs. Peterson doesn't bite most days. I need to send some men after those bandits while the trail's fresh." Zara allowed herself to be led inside, acutely aware of the curious stares from the ranch hands. The whispers had already begun. She could feel them like insects crawling on her skin. It was always the same wherever she went. The main house was surprisingly refined for a frontier ranch. Polished wood floors, quality furniture, and even some artwork adorned the spacious rooms. Mrs. Peterson guided her upstairs to a comfortable bedroom with a copper bathtub that servants were already filling with steaming water. "Mr. Calloway keeps this room for guests," the housekeeper explained. "Though we don't get many out here. I'll find you some clothes. My niece left some things behind last visit that might fit you well enough for now." When Mrs. Peterson left, Zara sank onto the bed, the events of the day finally catching up to her. Tears threatened, but she forced them back. She hadn't cried since leaving Boston 2 months ago, and she wouldn't start now. After bathing and changing into a simple but clean dress, Zara made her way downstairs, following the smell of cooking food. She found Blake in the dining room, freshly changed himself, studying papers at a large oak table. He stood when she entered. "Miss Thornwood, you look recovered." "As much as possible, given the circumstances." She remained in the doorway, uncertain of her place. "Please join me. Mrs. Peterson will bring supper shortly." He pulled out a chair for her. "I've sent riders to the nearest telegraph office in Riversbend. If you have family to notify of your safety—" "I don't," Zara interrupted sharply, then moderated her tone. "That is, there's no one expecting me." Blake studied her face but didn't press. "Were you headed somewhere specific when the stage was attacked?" "Helena," she answered, sitting down stiffly. "I have a position waiting as a schoolteacher." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Helena's still 3 days' journey from here. When you're ready, I'll arrange to have you escorted there safely." "You're very kind, Mr. Calloway, but I wouldn't want to impose further. It's no imposition. I have business in that direction anyway." His blue eyes held hers for a moment too long, making Zara wonder again about that flicker of recognition she'd seen earlier. Mrs. Peterson interrupted by bringing in a hearty meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. As they ate, Blake kept the conversation light, telling stories about the ranch and Montana territory that almost made Zara smile despite herself. It wasn't until Mrs. Peterson had cleared the dishes and left them with coffee that Blake's tone changed. "Miss Thornwood," he began carefully, "I have a confession to make. Your name was familiar to me when you introduced yourself." Zara's spine stiffened. Here it came, the moment she'd been dreading. Somehow, her past had followed her even to this remote place. "I receive newspapers from back east," Blake continued. "About 6 months ago, there was considerable coverage of a trial in Boston. A prominent banker named Edward Thornwood was convicted of defrauding his clients. His daughter testified against him." The coffee cup in Zara's hand clattered against its saucer. "I see news travels even to the frontier. The papers painted you as either a hero or a villain, depending on which one you read," Blake said gently. "For what it's worth, I thought it took considerable courage to stand up for the truth, even against your own father." Zara's laugh was bitter. "Courage? Is that what they called it? I was branded a traitor to my family, a social pariah. Do you know what it's like to walk down the street and have people cross to the other side to avoid you? Not for the same reasons, but yes," Blake said quietly. "I do." Something in his voice made Zara look at him more closely. For the first time, she noticed a thin scar running from his right temple down to his jaw, partially hidden by his beard. "My father wasn't just defrauding clients," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was stealing from widows and orphans, people who trusted him with their last pennies. When I found the evidence, I couldn't ignore it, no matter what it would cost me." "And it cost you everything," Blake surmised. "My home, my friends, my reputation." Zara stared into her coffee. "After the trial, no one would receive me. The teaching position in Helena was the only one that would accept my application, and only because they're desperate for educated women out here." Blake was silent for a long moment. "The West isn't Boston, Miss Thornwood. Out here, people tend to judge you more by what you do than by what others say about you." "Is that true?" Zara raised her eyes to his. "Because I've found that rumors and gossip poison wells even in the most remote places." "Not if you don't let them," Blake replied. "Here, you can build whatever life you choose." "Is that what you did?" she asked boldly. "Build a new life away from something?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a brief moment, his confident facade cracked, revealing something wounded underneath. "We all have ghosts, Miss Thornwood. The difference is whether we let them haunt us or put them to rest." He stood abruptly. "You must be tired. I'll have Mrs. Peterson show you back to your room." That night, Zara stood by the window of her bedroom, gazing out at the vast Montana sky crowded with more stars than she'd ever seen in Boston. Blake Calloway intrigued her. He knew her shame and hadn't immediately shunned her. But she sensed he carried his own secrets, perhaps ones as dark as hers. She'd learned the hard way not to trust too quickly. Tomorrow she would thank him for his hospitality and press on to Helena, where she could build the solitary but respectable life she'd planned. The less she involved herself with the handsome, mysterious rancher, the safer her heart would be. Little did she know that fate and Blake Calloway had other plans. Dawn broke over Broken Creek Ranch in a spectacular display of pink and gold. Zara had risen early, unable to sleep in the unfamiliar surroundings. She dressed in the borrowed clothes and made her way downstairs, surprised to find the house already active with servants preparing for the day. Outside, ranch hands were going about their morning chores. Zara slipped out onto the porch, breathing in the crisp morning air. The vastness of the landscape still astonished her, rolling plains stretching to distant mountains, with nothing to obstruct the view. It has a way of making a person feel small, doesn't it? Blake's voice came from behind her. Zara turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, already dressed for the day in work clothes, a cup of coffee in his hand. "I was just thinking how different it is from Boston," she admitted. "There, you can hardly see the sky between the buildings." Blake offered her a steaming cup. "Coffee? Mrs. Peterson says breakfast will be ready soon." She accepted the cup, careful not to let their fingers touch. "Thank you for everything. I hope to repay your kindness someday." "No need. Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," Zara replied softly. Blake studied her over the rim of his cup. "I've been thinking about your situation. The next stage to Helena doesn't leave Riversbend until Friday. That's 4 days from now." "Oh." Zara hadn't considered this complication. "Perhaps I could find lodging in town until then." "You could," Blake agreed. "But Riversbend is small and word travels fast. If you're trying to arrive in Helena without complications from your past, staying at the only hotel in town might not be the best approach." Zara felt a chill despite the warm coffee. "You think someone would recognize me even here?" "It's possible. Eastern newspapers do reach us eventually." Blake hesitated. "I have another suggestion if you're amenable." "I'm listening." "Stay here until Friday. The ranch is isolated enough that you won't have to worry about prying eyes. And," he seemed to choose his next words carefully, "I could use someone with your education to help me with some business correspondence. My foreman usually assists, but he's laid up with a broken leg. Consider it a way to earn your keep, if your pride demands it." Zara was suspicious of his offer. "You're being unusually kind to a stranger, Mr. Calloway." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Perhaps I'm not as kind as you think. I'm a businessman, Miss Thornwood, and educated help is hard to find out here. I'm merely taking advantage of fortunate circumstances." Zara wasn't convinced this was the whole truth, but she had to admit the arrangement made sense. "Very well. I accept your offer until Friday." "Excellent." Blake seemed genuinely pleased. "After breakfast, I'll show you to my office." Breakfast was a surprisingly elaborate affair. Mrs. Peterson served eggs, bacon, fresh biscuits, and preserves, all while fussing over Zara's delicate constitution. Several ranch hands joined them, each tipping their hats respectfully to Zara before digging into their food with hearty appetites. Blake introduced his foreman, a burly man named James who sat with his broken leg propped on a chair, and various other key workers. They were a rough-looking bunch, but unfailingly polite, and Zara found herself relaxing slightly in their company. After the meal, Blake led her to a study at the back of the house. Unlike the rest of the ranch's practical furnishings, this room held fine furniture, bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, and a massive desk covered with papers. "You have quite a library," Zara observed, running her fingers along the spines of books. "Shakespeare, Dickens, Thoreau. These aren't typical cowboy reading." "I wasn't always a rancher," Blake replied simply, clearing space on the desk. "These are contracts needing review, correspondence requiring answers, and ledgers that need balancing. Feel free to organize them however you see fit." Zara approached the desk, quickly assessing the chaotic pile. "You weren't exaggerating about needing help." "James is a fine foreman but a terrible secretary," Blake chuckled. "I'll leave you to it. I have to check on the north pasture. We lost some cattle to wolves last week." As Blake turned to leave, a newspaper clipping fluttered from one of the books on his desk. Zara picked it up and froze. It was a picture of her, cut from a Boston newspaper, alongside an article about her father's trial. The headline read, "Banker's daughter betrays family for justice. Mr. Calloway," she called, her voice tight. "What is this?" Blake turned, saw what she was holding, and his expression changed to one of discomfort. "I can explain." "Please do." Zara's hand trembled slightly. "You just happened to have my picture? Is this why you were so kind to offer me shelter?" Some morbid curiosity about the notorious Thornwood scandal. Blake closed the door and stepped closer. "It's not what you think, isn't it? Did you plan to parade me around as some kind of oddity? Look, everyone. The Boston traitor who sent her own father to prison." "No," Blake said firmly. "I kept that article because I admired what you did. It takes uncommon courage to stand for justice when doing so costs you everything." "Admired?" Zara scoffed. "You don't know me, Mr. Calloway. You don't know what I lost." "I know more than you think," he said quietly. "Your father's bank held accounts for many people, including some out west who had invested their life savings. When he was exposed, it saved dozens of frontier families from ruin." This revelation stopped Zara cold. "What are you saying?" Blake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My younger brother had his entire inheritance invested with Thornwood Bank. When rumors of impropriety started, he was prepared to dismiss them until your testimony confirmed everything. He withdrew his money just before the collapse. You saved him from financial ruin." Zara stared at him, processing this information. "So, you recognized me from the beginning, on the prairie?" "Yes," Blake admitted. "I'd seen your picture, read about what happened. When you said your name, I knew exactly who you were. And you didn't think to mention this immediately? Would you have trusted me if I had?" Blake countered. "A stranger who knew all about your painful past? I planned to tell you once you were more comfortable here." Zara wasn't sure what to feel, angry at the deception or relieved that his interest wasn't malicious. She carefully placed the clipping on the desk. "I appreciate what you've done for me, Mr. Calloway, but I don't need pity or special treatment because you feel indebted to me." "It's not pity, Miss Thornwood." Blake's voice was low and intense. "It's respect. You did the right thing when the easier path was to remain silent. That kind of integrity is rare, especially when it comes at such personal cost." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, Zara felt the world narrow to just this room. Just this man with his unexpectedly kind eyes and the understanding in them that she hadn't found anywhere else. The moment was broken by a sharp knock at the door. One of the ranch hands entered, barely acknowledging Zara before addressing Blake urgently. "Boss, Ryder's coming. Looks like Deacon Reynolds and his boys." Blake's expression hardened instantly. "How many?" "6, maybe 7. Alert the men. No one draws unless I give the word." Blake turned to Zara. "Stay inside. Reynolds isn't known for his gentlemanly behavior around women." "Who is he?" Zara asked as Blake checked the revolver at his hip. "Cattle baron from the next valley. We've had disagreements about property lines." Blake's tight expression suggested these disagreements went beyond simple boundary disputes. "Just stay out of sight." Blake strode out, leaving Zara alone in the study. But instead of following his instructions, she moved to the window that overlooked the front of the ranch house. 6 riders were approaching, led by a heavy-set man with a thick gray beard. Even from a distance, she could see the arrogance in his posture. Curiosity overcame caution, and Zara slipped into the hallway, positioning herself near an open window where she could hear the exchange outside without being seen. "Calloway?" boomed a gruff voice that must belong to Reynolds. "Heard you had some excitement yesterday. Bandits hit a stagecoach on your property." "Word travels fast," Blake replied coolly. What's your interest in it, Deacon? Just being neighborly. Also heard you brought back a survivor. A woman. Zara's blood ran cold. How could news of her arrival have spread so quickly? My business is my own, Blake said. State your purpose or ride on. Now, Reynolds chuckled. But there was no humor in it. I'm just concerned. Those weren't just any bandits. They were Silas Reeves' gang. Dangerous men to cross. Is that a threat? Blake's voice had dropped dangerously low. A friendly warning. Reeve doesn't like leaving witnesses. If you're harboring one, you might find yourself with unwanted visitors. Unless what? Unless you reconsider my offer for your North water rights. Sell them to me and I might be able to smooth things over with Reeve. He does business with me from time to time. The pieces suddenly clicked into place in Zara's mind. Reynolds was working with the bandits, or at least had connections to them. The stagecoach robbery hadn't been random, it had been orchestrated to pressure Blake into selling valuable water rights. Get off my land, Reynolds, Blake said, his voice deadly calm. And tell Reeve if he or any of his men come within a mile of my property, they won't live to regret it. Your choice, Calloway. Just remember accidents happen out here all the time. To ranches, to livestock, to people. The sound of horses moving away told Zara the confrontation was over, at least for now. She hurried back to the study, her mind racing. She had stumbled into the middle of a dangerous situation, one that had nothing to do with her past and everything to do with frontier greed. When Blake returned, his face was like thunder. He stopped short when he saw Zara waiting by the desk. You heard, he stated rather than asked. Enough, she admitted. This Reynolds person, he's allied with the bandits who attacked my stagecoach? Blake nodded grimly. I've suspected for months that Reynolds has been backing Reeves' gang to harass smaller ranchers into selling out. Your stagecoach was likely targeted because it was crossing my land, a message to me. So the other passengers died because of a land dispute? Zara felt sick at the thought. Welcome to the frontier, Miss Thornwood. Justice is sometimes a luxury out here. Blake's expression softened when he saw her distress. I'm sorry you've been caught in the middle of this. Zara straightened her shoulders. It seems we're both facing enemies, Mr. Calloway. Perhaps we can help each other. What do you mean? You need someone who can organize your business affairs. I need safe passage to Helena and a fresh start. In the meantime, I have experience with unscrupulous men who use fear and intimidation to get what they want. A slow smile spread across Blake's face. Are you proposing an alliance, Miss Thornwood? A temporary one, she clarified, though something in her heart whispered it might not be so temporary after all. At least until we've dealt with our respective ghosts. Blake extended his hand. Deal. Zara hesitated only briefly before shaking it, his warm grip sending an unexpected flutter through her chest. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt something like hope stirring within her. What she didn't know was how quickly that hope would be tested and how deeply her life would become entangled with Blake Calloway's in the days to come. The next 3 days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings, Zara worked in Blake's study, organizing his chaotic business affairs with an efficiency that clearly impressed him. Afternoons, she often accompanied him on rides around the ranch, learning about cattle operations and the challenges of frontier life. During these rides, they talked in a way Zara hadn't experienced with anyone before. Blake told her about growing up in Virginia, losing his parents in the war, and heading west with his younger brother to start fresh. He spoke of the early years of the ranch, the backbreaking work and setbacks, and the satisfaction of building something from nothing. In turn, Zara shared stories of her Boston upbringing, her mother's early death, and her complicated relationship with her father. She explained how she discovered his fraudulent schemes while helping in his office, how she confronted him privately first, begging him to make it right, only to be dismissed as a naive girl who didn't understand business. The worst part wasn't the social ostracism afterward. She confessed as they rested their horses near a creek on the third day. It was realizing that the father I loved and respected had been a fiction, that the real Edward Thornwood would rather destroy lives than admit his wrongdoing. Blake watched a hawk circling overhead. We all have illusions about the people we love. The test of character is what we do when those illusions shatter. Is that what happened with you? Zara asked. Did someone shatter your illusions? Blake touched the scar on his face unconsciously. Something like that. He didn't elaborate and Zara didn't press. She was beginning to understand that Blake Calloway revealed himself in his own time, in his own way. As they rode back to the ranch house, Blake suddenly reined in his horse. Riders coming. Fast. Zara followed his gaze to see 3 horsemen approaching at a gallop. Even from a distance, she could tell by their posture that something was wrong. Those are my men, Blake said, spurring his horse forward to meet them. The lead rider, a young cowboy named Tom, pulled up breathlessly. Boss! Rustlers hit the north herd. Drove off about 30 head. Peterson and Davis are tracking them, but they sent me back for reinforcements. Blake's expression hardened. Reynolds' work. Can't say for sure, but they left a clear trail heading toward Bitter Creek. That's Reynolds' territory. Get back to the ranch. Tell James to send 5 armed men to meet us at the North Ridge. Blake turned to Zara. Miss Thornwood, I'll escort you back to the house. I can find my way, she insisted. Don't delay on my account. Blake hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and urgency. Go, Zara urged. Your cattle are being stolen as we speak. With a quick nod, Blake wheeled his horse around. Stay alert. If you see anyone suspicious, ride hard for the ranch house. As Blake and Tom galloped away, Zara turned her horse toward home, unease settling in her stomach. The conflict between Blake and Reynolds was escalating and her presence on the ranch seemed to be making it worse. She had ridden perhaps a mile when the sound of hoofbeats made her pull up short. Expecting to see one of Blake's men, she was horrified to instead find herself facing 3 rough-looking strangers, their faces partially concealed by bandanas. Well, drawled the lead rider, a man with cold eyes and a missing front tooth. Look what we found, boys. Must be the witness Reeves been looking for. Zara's heart pounded as she realized these must be members of the gang that had attacked her stagecoach. She glanced around desperately, but there was nowhere to run on the open plain. Mr. Reynolds sends his regards, the man continued, circling her slowly. Says you're causing his friend Calloway to be unreasonable about business matters. I don't know what you're talking about, Zara replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. Don't much matter what you know, lady. What matters is you're coming with us. Reeve wants to have a word. He reached for her reins. In that moment, Zara made a split-second decision. Instead of pulling away, she spurred her horse directly toward the man, catching him by surprise. As their horses collided, she lashed out with her riding crop, striking him across the face. He howled in pain and outrage as Zara kicked her horse into a gallop, racing toward the ranch house visible in the distance. Behind her, she heard angry shouts and pursuit. Her horse was fast, one of Blake's best, but the bandits were gaining. A shot rang out, going wide, but close enough to make her duck low in the saddle. The ranch house seemed impossibly far away. Suddenly, from a stand of trees to her right, riders emerged, Blake and 2 of his men, returning from a different direction than she'd expected. They saw her situation immediately and charged toward the pursuing bandits, guns drawn. The outlaws, outnumbered, wheeled their horses around and fled. Blake raced to Zara's side, his face a mask of concern and fury. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, eyes scanning her for injuries. "No, they didn't catch me. Zara was shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. They said they were taking me to Reeve, that Reynolds sent them. Blake's expression darkened. This has gone too far. Reynolds and Reeve think they can threaten innocent people on my land. He turned to his men. Get Miss Thornwood safely to the house. Post extra guards tonight. What are you going to do? Zara asked, suddenly afraid for him. What I should have done months ago, deal with Reynolds directly. Blake's blue eyes had turned to ice. This isn't your fight, Miss Thornwood. Tomorrow, I'll have men escort you to Helena as planned. No, Zara said firmly, surprising herself and Blake. These men attacked my stagecoach. They killed innocent people. They just tried to abduct me. This became my fight the moment they made me a target. Blake studied her face, seeing the determination there. It's dangerous. Reynolds isn't above killing to get what he wants. Neither was my father, Zara replied quietly. He just used financial ruin instead of bullets. I didn't back down then. I won't now. Something changed in Blake's expression, respect deepening into something more complex. You are a remarkable woman, Zara Thornwood. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. What's your plan? Back at the ranch house, Blake gathered his most trusted men in the dining room. James, his injured foreman, spread out a map of the surrounding territory. Reynolds has been after our water rights for 2 years, Blake explained to Zara. The North Creek is the only reliable water source in the region during dry summers. Without it, ranchers would have to drive their cattle 20 miles to the river. So controlling it means controlling who can ranch in this valley, Zara surmised. Exactly. I've refused to sell because I know Reynolds would charge exorbitant rates that would drive smaller ranchers out of business. Blake traced a line on the map. We believe Reynolds has been backing Reeves' gang to pressure ranchers. Stock gets rustled. Buildings burn mysteriously. People get hurt until selling out seems the safest option. But you haven't sold, Zara observed. A grim smile touched Blake's lips. I'm stubborn that way. So what's changed now? They've never targeted civilians before, Blake said. Attacking a stagecoach, trying to abduct you, they've crossed a line. And now we have evidence linking Reynolds to Reeve. James nodded. The rustlers today drove our cattle straight toward Reynolds' south pasture. No attempt to cover their tracks. They're getting bolder. Or desperate, Blake added. The territorial marshal is due through these parts next week. If we can gather enough evidence against Reynolds before then. He could be arrested, Zara finished. But evidence that would stand in court would be difficult to obtain. You'd need testimony from someone in Reeves' gang, or documentation of payments from Reynolds. The men stared at her, surprised by her legal knowledge. My father's trial taught me a few things about evidence, she explained with a bitter smile. Blake leaned forward. Reynolds keeps his business records at his ranch house. If someone could access them. No, James interrupted. It's too dangerous. Reynolds has at least a dozen armed men at his place. I wasn't suggesting a frontal assault, Blake clarified. I was thinking of something more subtle. His eyes met Zara's. Tomorrow night, Reynolds is hosting a gathering for wealthy ranchers and businessmen from the territory. A social occasion to demonstrate his civilized side. Zara immediately understood. And you're invited? I am. Reynolds keeps up appearances, can't openly feud with a neighbor without raising questions. But I've always declined his invitations. Until now, Zara said, seeing the plan forming. Blake nodded. Until now. If I attend with a companion, it would seem I'm finally willing to put aside our differences. While engaging Reynolds socially, my companion might find an opportunity to locate his office and examine his records. The room fell silent as everyone realized what Blake was suggesting. You want me to search his house during a party? Zara asked incredulously. You have experience with financial documents. You'd know what to look for. Blake's expression was serious. I wouldn't ask if there was another way, but I can't do it myself. Reynolds wouldn't let me out of his sight. It's too dangerous, James protested again. If she's caught, I'll do it. Zara interrupted, her mind made up. If there's evidence linking Reynolds to the attack that killed those people on my stagecoach, I want to find it. Blake studied her face. Are you certain? This isn't your battle. As I said before, it became my battle when they attacked my stagecoach. Zara straightened her shoulders. Besides, no one would suspect a Boston lady of espionage. A slow smile spread across Blake's face, admiration mixed with something warmer. Then we have a plan. James, send word to Reynolds that I'll be attending his gathering tomorrow. With a guest. That evening, Zara stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The beauty contrasted sharply with the danger that lay ahead. She heard Blake's footsteps behind her but didn't turn. Having second thoughts? He asked, coming to stand beside her. No, she answered honestly. Just preparing myself. I've never done anything like this before. You don't have to. We can find another way. Zara shook her head. This is the most direct path to justice. I believe in that, whatever the risk. Blake was silent for a moment, then said quietly, When I first saw your picture in that newspaper, I thought you must be either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish to stand against your own father publicly. Many thought the latter, Zara admitted. But now, having met you, Blake turned to face her. I understand it wasn't about bravery or foolishness at all. It was about integrity. You simply couldn't do otherwise and still be Zara Thornwood. The understanding in his eyes moved her deeply. For years, people had judged her decision without truly comprehending it. Blake saw through to the heart of the matter, to the heart of her. Thank you, she whispered, emotion making her voice unsteady, for seeing me as I am. Blake's hand moved as if to touch her face, then stopped. We should rest. Tomorrow will test us both. As he turned to leave, Zara found herself calling after him. Blake! He paused, looking back. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad I met you. Something flickered in his eyes, a vulnerability quickly masked. So am I, Zara. More than you know. As he disappeared into the house, Zara remained on the porch, her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. She had come west to escape her past, not to find a future. Yet something was taking root inside her, something she hadn't believed possible again. Something that frightened and exhilarated her in equal measure. Tomorrow would determine not just the fate of Blake's ranch, but perhaps her own fate as well. The thought should have terrified her, yet instead, she felt strangely calm, as if after a lifetime of uncertainty, she had finally found her true north. The Reynolds estate was even larger than Blake's ranch house. A sprawling structure of stone and timber that spoke of frontier wealth and ambition. As Blake helped Zara down from the carriage, she took a steadying breath, conscious of the eyes watching them from the veranda. Remember, Blake murmured, offering his arm. Reynolds may recognize you from newspaper accounts. If he does, act surprised but not alarmed. Zara nodded slightly, adjusting the elegant blue gown Mrs. Peterson had altered for her from clothes left by Blake's sister-in-law. With her hair arranged in a sophisticated style and borrowed jewelry at her throat, she looked every inch the Boston society lady, exactly the image they wanted to project. Mr. Calloway, Deacon Reynolds himself descended the steps to greet them. A large man with a carefully trimmed gray beard and cold eyes that didn't match his welcoming smile. I must say, I was surprised to receive your acceptance. And with a guest, no less. Mr. Reynolds. Blake's greeting was polite but cool. Allow me to introduce Miss Zara Thornwood, recently arrived from Boston. Miss Thornwood, Deacon Reynolds. Reynolds' eyes narrowed slightly at her name, confirming Blake's suspicion that he might recognize it. Thornwood? Of the Boston Thornwoods. Zara offered her most gracious smile. Indeed, though I'm afraid my family name has seen better days, Mr. Reynolds. Yes, I recall reading something. Unfortunate. Reynolds studied her with new interest. You're a long way from home, Miss Thornwood. I find the West offers opportunities for new beginnings, Zara replied smoothly. Mr. Calloway has been kind enough to assist me after I experienced some trouble on my journey. Trouble? Reynolds' gaze flicked to Blake. Miss Thornwood's stagecoach was attacked, Blake said, his voice deceptively casual. By bandits. A flicker of something concern, perhaps, or calculation crossed Reynolds' face. How terrible. You must tell me all about it inside. My wife will be fascinated. She reads too many dime novels about frontier dangers. As they followed Reynolds into the house, Blake's hand pressed reassuringly against Zara's back. The touch steadied her, reminding her that she wasn't facing this danger alone. The interior of the Reynolds home was ostentatiously decorated, combining frontier rusticity with imported luxury in a way that spoke more of wealth than taste. About 30 guests were already present, ranchers and their wives, merchants from nearby towns, and a few officials from the territorial government. Quite a gathering, Blake observed as Reynolds signaled a servant to bring champagne. I believe in civilized society, even on the frontier, Reynolds replied. Something you might appreciate more, Calloway, if you participated in it more often. The barb was delivered with a smile, but its intent was clear. Before Blake could respond, a plump woman in an over-decorated dress approached. You must be the famous Blake Calloway, she said, extending her hand. My husband speaks of you often. I'm Margaret Reynolds. As Blake greeted her, Reynolds turned to Zara. Miss Thornwood, you must meet Judge Wilson. He handles legal matters in this part of the territory and has connections back east that might interest you. With a meaningful glance at Blake, Zara allowed Reynolds to lead her away. This separation was part of the plan, giving her an opportunity to learn the layout of the house while Blake kept Reynolds occupied later in the evening. Judge Wilson proved to be a pompous but useful acquaintance. As he droned on about his legal career, Zara casually surveyed the room, noting doorways and corridors. She paid particular attention when a servant emerged from what appeared to be a private wing of the house. Of course, frontier justice is necessarily more flexible than Eastern courts, the judge was saying. Out here, a man's reputation often matters more than legal technicalities. How fascinating, Zara replied, feigning interest. Does that apply to business matters as well? I understand land and water rights are quite contentious issues. The judge's expression became guarded. Indeed, though I find it's best not to discuss specific cases in social settings. Of course. Forgive my curiosity. Zara smiled disarmingly. I suppose my father's situation has made me overly interested in financial improprieties. Ah yes, Edward Thornwood. The judge lowered his voice. A regrettable business. I read about your role in the proceedings. Zara tensed, waiting for the judgment that usually followed. Instead, the judge surprised her. It must have required extraordinary courage to come forward. The law can only function when people of integrity support it, even at personal cost. Before Zara could respond to this unexpected approval, dinner was announced. Blake appeared at her side, offering his arm to escort her to the dining room. Everything all right? He murmured as they walked. Better than expected, she replied softly. And I think I know where Reynolds' office might be. Private wing, east side of the house. Blake nodded almost imperceptibly. After dinner, Reynolds will want to show me his prized horses, a tradition with new guests. That's your opportunity. The dinner was elaborate by frontier standards, 5 courses served on imported china, with wines that must have cost a fortune to transport to Montana territory. Throughout the meal, Zara found herself seated between a cattle buyer from Chicago and Margaret Reynolds, who proved surprisingly talkative after several glasses of wine. It's so refreshing to have another educated woman at these gatherings, Margaret confided. Most of these ranchers' wives can barely manage a coherent conversation about anything beyond children and cookery. Your home is lovely, Zara replied diplomatically. You must spend considerable time managing such a large household. Margaret waved a bejeweled hand dismissively. Deacon handles all the business matters. I'm not permitted in his study. He says women have no head for figures. How traditional of him, Zara commented, filing away the information. Is your husband's study part of the private wing I noticed earlier? Yes, the entire East Wing is Deacon's domain. His office, gun room, and private smoking parlor where the men will retire after dinner. Margaret leaned closer, her voice dropping. Though between us, I suspect some of his business associates aren't the sort one would normally entertain in a respectable home. Zara's pulse quickened. Oh? What makes you say that? Margaret glanced around conspiratorially. Men who arrive after dark, speak with Deacon privately, and leave before the household wakes. Very mysterious. When I ask, he says it's just business in that tone men use when they think women are too simple to understand important matters. How intriguing, Zara said, her mind racing with the implications. Your husband seems a complex man. Ambitious? Margaret corrected, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Deacon won't rest until he controls the entire valley. Blake Calloway is the only one who still stands in his way. She cast a speculative glance down the table where Blake was engaged in conversation with Reynolds. Though perhaps that's changing, given his presence here tonight. After dinner, as predicted, Reynolds invited the male guests to view his prize stallions before retiring to the smoking room. As the men filed out, Zara caught Blake's eye. A nearly imperceptible nod passed between them. Margaret Reynolds organized the ladies in the drawing room for coffee and dessert. Zara participated briefly, then excused herself to find the powder room. Once in the hallway, she glanced around to ensure she was unobserved before slipping toward the east wing. The corridor was dimly lit and quiet. Zara moved silently, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give her away. She tried the first door she came to, a gun room, as Margaret had mentioned. The next was locked. The third opened to reveal a handsomely appointed study, with a massive desk, bookshelves, and a large safe in the corner. Closing the door quietly behind her, Zara moved to the desk. The surface was neat, with only a few papers visible. She began carefully searching the drawers, mindful not to disturb their contents. In the second drawer, she found a ledger book similar to those her father had kept for his legitimate business transactions. Zara opened it, quickly scanning the entries. Most seemed to be normal ranch expenses and income, but as she turned the pages, she noticed a pattern of unmarked payments, large sums listed only as consulting fees, with no recipient named. She continued searching and found a locked drawer in the desk. Using a hairpin from her coiffure, a trick learned from her misspent youth exploring her father's study, she managed to pick the simple lock. Inside was a smaller ledger, this one with a different style of bookkeeping. Names were recorded here, including Reeve S. Besides substantial amounts, dates corresponded with reported rustling incidents and property damage at neighboring ranches. Most damning of all, an entry from 3 days ago noted, "Stagecoach matter, additional payment required due to complications." Zara's hands trembled. Here was the evidence they needed, proof that Reynolds had paid Reeves' gang to attack the stagecoach. She needed to copy this information, but she had brought nothing to write with. Looking around desperately, she spotted writing materials on a side table. Moving quickly, she began copying the most incriminating entries onto a sheet of Reynolds' own stationery, her handwriting small and neat. So focused was she on her task that she didn't hear the study door open until it was too late. Well, what have we here? Zara froze, then slowly turned to face Deacon Reynolds, who stood in the doorway with a look of calculating interest on his face. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I was looking for the powder room. I must have taken a wrong turn. In my private study? Going through my private papers." Reynolds stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I think not, Miss Thornwood. Or should I say, the star witness from the stagecoach robbery." Zara straightened, knowing denial was pointless. "Those people died because you ordered it. All for water rights and greed." "Business," Reynolds corrected calmly. "Just business. The West wasn't built by the faint-hearted, Miss Thornwood. It was built by men willing to do what's necessary." "Murder is necessary?" Zara challenged, her fear giving way to anger. "Terrorizing innocent people?" Reynolds shrugged. "Regrettable but effective. Calloway was supposed to be on that stagecoach, not ordinary passengers. A miscommunication." He moved closer, glancing at the papers in her hand. "I see you found my private accounts. Calloway put you up to this, I assume. Does it matter?" "The territorial marshal will find this evidence quite compelling." A cold smile spread across Reynolds' face. "The marshal won't find anything, because these records won't exist by morning. And I'm afraid you won't be continuing to Helena as planned." The threat hung in the air between them. Zara backed away, bumping into the desk. "Blake knows I'm here," she said. "If anything happens to me—" "Nothing will happen to you here," Reynolds interrupted smoothly. "That would be uncivilized. But the Montana wilderness is dangerous for travelers. Accidents occur. Bodies are rarely found." Terror washed through Zara, but she refused to show it. "Is that what happened to the other ranchers who refused to sell? Accidents?" Something flickered in Reynolds' eyes, surprise, perhaps, that she had made the connection. "You're clever, Miss Thornwood. Too clever for your own good." He reached for her, but Zara was quicker. She flung the inkwell from the desk into his face, causing him to howl in pain and rage as black ink splattered across his expensive suit and eyes. In that moment of confusion, she darted past him toward the door. Reynolds recovered quickly, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "You'll regret that, you Boston bit." The study door burst open, revealing Blake with his gun drawn, flanked by two of his ranch hands similarly armed. "Let her go, Reynolds," Blake ordered, his voice deadly quiet. Reynolds maintained his grip on Zara, his face contorted with fury beneath streaks of ink. "This is my house, Calloway. Your woman was caught stealing my private papers. I have every right—" "Your rights don't extend to murder for hire," Blake cut in. "Release her, or I'll forget we're in civilized company." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Reynolds slowly loosened his grip on Zara's arm. She immediately moved to Blake's side, the incriminating papers still clutched in her hand. "You have nothing," Reynolds snarled. "Your word against mine. Who do you think the territorial officials will believe? A respected businessman or a rancher with a personal grudge? They'll believe documented evidence of payments to known criminals," Zara replied, holding up the papers. "And the testimony of Judge Wilson, who I took the liberty of informing about certain suspicious patterns before dinner. He seemed quite interested." Reynolds' face paled beneath the ink stains. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Zara met his gaze steadily. "I learned from my father that men like you always believe yourselves untouchable. That's your weakness." Blake kept his gun trained on Reynolds as he addressed his men. "Find the judge. and keep an eye out for any of Reynolds' men trying to interfere. As one of the hands left to comply, Reynolds seemed to deflate, sinking into his desk chair. What do you want, Calloway? Money? More land? Justice? Blake replied simply. For the people who died on that stagecoach. For the ranchers you've terrorized. He glanced at Zara. For those who've suffered because men like you believe power equals right. Reynolds' cold eyes moved between them. You're a fool, Calloway. This territory wasn't built on justice. It was built on strength. You're wrong, Zara interjected quietly. It's being built by people who believe in something better than the law of the gun. People who stand for what's right, even when it's difficult. Blake's gaze met hers, warm with admiration and something deeper that made her heart race. In that moment, surrounded by danger, Zara felt oddly at peace, as if she'd finally found where she belonged, and with whom. Judge Wilson arrived minutes later, his expression grave as he reviewed the evidence Zara had collected. 2 territorial deputies who had been among the dinner guests were summoned, and Reynolds was placed under guard in his own home, pending formal charges. As the situation was explained to the astonished dinner guests, Blake led Zara outside to the relative quiet of the veranda. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle as he examined the bruise forming on her arm where Reynolds had grabbed her. "I'm fine," Zara assured him. "We got what we came for, at too high a risk, when I realized Reynolds had left the stables." Blake's voice trailed off, his expression haunted. "If anything had happened to you—" "But it didn't," Zara reminded him. "We succeeded, Blake. Reynolds will face justice. His connection to Reeves' gang will be exposed." Blake shook his head, a smile finally breaking through his concern. "You are the most remarkable woman I've ever met, Zara Thornwood. You faced down one of the most dangerous men in the territory with nothing but your wits and an inkwell." Zara laughed softly. The inkwell was admittedly improvised. Blake's expression grew serious again. "The stagecoach to Helena leaves tomorrow, if you still want to go." He paused. "But I was hoping you might consider staying, at least for a while longer." Zara's breath caught. "Staying? At Broken Creek Ranch?" "Yes." Blake took her hands in his. "I need a business manager with your skills. Someone who understands ledgers and correspondence." "Is that all you need?" Zara asked quietly, her heart pounding. Blake's blue eyes held hers, vulnerable for the first time since she'd met him. "No, it's not all." He released one of her hands to gently touch her cheek. "I need someone who sees the world as it should be, not just as it is. Someone who reminds me why I came west in the first place, not just to build a ranch, but to build a life worth living." Zara leaned slightly into his touch. "And you think I'm that someone?" "I know you are." Blake's voice was husky with emotion. "From the moment you faced me down behind that overturned wagon, I knew you were different. Special. I've been running from my past for so long," Zara confessed, "trying to outrun the whispers and judgment. I never expected to find someone who would see beyond the scandal. I've been shamed too long," she whispered, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her. Blake's gaze intensified. "Then let me give you honor," he replied softly. "Stay with me, Zara. Build something new here with me." In answer, Zara reached up and touched the scar on his face, the mark of his own past struggles. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll stay." Blake's smile transformed his face before he leaned down to kiss her gently at first, then with growing passion as Zara responded, her arms encircling his neck. Under the vast Montana sky, with stars witnessing their promise, 2 wounded souls found in each other the healing they had both been seeking. When they finally broke apart, Blake rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, life on a Montana ranch isn't easy, even for a Boston lady as tough as you. Zara laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. I think I've proven I can handle frontier challenges. That you have. Blake kissed her again, briefly but tenderly. We should return inside. The judge will have questions for us both. As they turned toward the house, Blake kept her hand firmly in his. Whatever challenges lay ahead Reynolds' trial, the continued threat from Reeves' gang, the daily struggles of ranch life, they would face them together. For Zara, who had been alone for so long, that promise meant everything. For months later, Zara stood on the porch of Broken Creek Ranch, watching autumn paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and amber. In her hands was a letter, the final correspondence from the territorial court regarding Deacon Reynolds' conviction for conspiracy and multiple counts of murder for hire. The evidence she had gathered that night, combined with testimony from one of Reeves' gang members who had turned state's witness, had been enough to ensure justice. Reynolds would spend the rest of his life in prison. Silas Reeve had been killed in a shootout with territorial marshals. The valley was at peace again. Good news. Blake's voice came from behind her as his arms encircled her waist. Zara leaned back against his chest, savoring his warmth. The best. The court has ordered Reynolds' water rights redistributed among the smaller ranchers he drove out. They'll be able to return and rebuild. Justice prevails, Blake murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Thanks to you. To us, Zara corrected, turning in his arms to face him. The past months had changed them both. Blake smiled more easily now, the burden of his long conflict with Reynolds lifted. The scar on his face seemed less prominent, or perhaps she simply saw beyond it to the man himself. As for Zara, she had found purpose beyond what she'd imagined possible when she fled Boston. The ranch's business affairs flourished under her management. She had started a small school for the children of ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders. Most importantly, she had found a home and love with a man who saw her strength rather than her shame. Mrs. Peterson says the wedding preparations are nearly complete, Blake said, his eyes warm as they rested on the simple diamond ring adorning Zara's left hand. 2 more weeks. Is it too soon? Zara asked, a touch of her old insecurity surfacing. People might talk the whirlwind courtship, my background. Blake gently tilted her chin up. Let them talk. We know the truth of who we are and what we've found together. And what is that, Mr. Calloway? Zara asked with a small smile. Redemption, he answered simply. A second chance. Love. He kissed her then, beneath the vast Montana sky that had witnessed their journey from strangers to partners to lovers. When they parted, Zara's eyes shimmered with happy tears. I never thought I'd find this, she confessed. Someone who would see past the scandal, who would understand why I had to do what I did. And I never thought I'd find someone who would challenge me to be better, to fight for what's right instead of just what's mine. Blake tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You changed everything, Zara Thornwood. Soon to be Zara Calloway, she reminded him with a smile. The finest name in Montana territory, Blake agreed, taking her hand and leading her inside, away from the cooling autumn air. That evening, as they sat before the fireplace in the study that had become their shared domain, Blake brought out a small wooden box. I have something for you, he said, placing it in her hands. A wedding gift, though I couldn't wait until the ceremony. Curious, Zara opened the box to find a leather-bound journal with her initials embossed in gold on the cover. Open it, Blake encouraged. Inside, on the first page, was written in Blake's strong hand, For Zara, who taught me that honor isn't just about defending what's yours, but standing for what's right. May this journal hold the story of our life together, a story of second chances and redemption. With all my love, Blake. Tears filled Zara's eyes as she traced the words with her fingertips. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I thought you might record our story," Blake explained, "for those who come after us. So they'll know that even in the wild frontier, love and justice can prevail." Zara leaned over to kiss him softly. "Our story is just beginning. And what a story it will be," Blake agreed, pulling her closer. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, covering Broken Creek Ranch in a blanket of white promise. Inside, by the warmth of the fire, Zara and Blake embraced their future, one built on understanding, respect, and a love that had transformed them both. 2 years later, Zara sat in the shade of the front porch, watching Blake teach their 1-year-old son Benjamin to take his first tentative steps across the yard. The ranch had prospered beyond their expectations. The main house had been expanded, the cattle herd had doubled, and Broken Creek Ranch had become known throughout the territory for its fair dealings and hospitality. "Look at him go," Blake called proudly as Benjamin managed 3 wobbly steps before plopping down on his bottom with a giggle. "He's got your determination, that's for certain. And your stubbornness," Zara replied with a laugh. "Once he sets his mind to something, there's no stopping him." Blake scooped up their son and carried him to the porch, settling beside Zara on the swing. Benjamin immediately reached for his mother, babbling happily as he settled in her lap. "Letter came while you were napping," Blake said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "From Boston." Zara took it with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She rarely received correspondence from the East anymore. Opening it, she scanned the contents, her expression growing solemn. "My father," she said quietly. "He's dying in prison. His lawyer says he's asking to see me, to make amends before the end." Blake covered her hand with his. "What do you want to do?" Zara gazed at their son, at the ranch that had become her true home, at the man who had helped her rebuild her life. "I don't know. Part of me says I owe him nothing after what he did." "And the other part?" Blake prompted gently. "The other part remembers the father who taught me to ride, who read to me when I was sick, who believed in me before he believed only in money." Zara sighed. "The man I testified against wasn't always the man he became." Blake nodded, understanding. "If you want to go, we'll go. All of us together." Zara looked at him in surprise. "You'd return to the East? After everything you've built here? The ranch will keep for a few weeks." Blake shifted Benjamin to his own lap. "This little cowboy should meet his Eastern relatives anyway. Show them what Montana stock looks like." The easy generosity of his offer moved Zara deeply. "Have I told you lately that I love you, Blake Calloway?" "Not since breakfast," he replied with a grin. "I'm feeling neglected." Zara leaned over to kiss him, their son squealing with delight between them. "I love you. For this, for everything." "Then it's settled. We'll leave next week, should reach Boston before winter sets in." Blake bounced Benjamin on his knee. "Besides, I've been curious about this fancy Eastern world that produced such an extraordinary woman." 1 month later, Zara stood beside her father's prison deathbed, Blake at her side with Benjamin in his arms. Edward Thornwood was a shadow of the powerful banker she remembered, thin, gray, his once commanding presence diminished by illness and confinement. "Zara," he whispered, his eyes lighting with something like wonder. "You came." "Yes, father." She moved closer to the bed, her emotions a complex tangle of grief, anger, and unexpected compassion. "I didn't deserve it," he acknowledged weakly. "After what I did. To those people. To you." "No, you didn't," Zara agreed, her voice steady. "But I didn't come for your sake. I came for mine. To close this chapter properly." Edward's gaze moved to Blake and Benjamin. "Your family? My husband, Blake Calloway, And your grandson, Benjamin. Zara felt Blake step closer, his solid presence giving her strength. A strong name, Edward murmured. For a strong line. His eyes, sunken but still sharp, assessed Blake. You're a fortunate man, Mr. Calloway. My daughter has more courage and integrity than I ever possessed. I know exactly how fortunate I am, sir, Blake replied evenly. Edward's hand trembled as he reached toward Zara. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, feeling the frailty of his grasp. I was wrong, he said, each word an effort. About everything that mattered. The money, the status. None of it meant anything in here. He gestured weakly at his surroundings. I lost everything that truly mattered because I couldn't see its value. Why, father? Zara asked, the question that had haunted her for years finally finding voice. Why did you do it? We had enough. We were respected, comfortable. A ghost of a bitter smile touched Edward's lips. Fear. After your mother died, I was terrified of losing what we had. Then of not measuring up to other bankers. Each step seemed justifiable at the time, just a small compromise for security. Until small compromises became large ones. He squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. You were right to testify, right to stop me. I see that now. Tears Zara had not expected to shed fell freely. I never wanted to hurt you. I just couldn't be part of the hurt you were causing others. I know. Edward's eyes moved to Blake again. You found a good man. A man of principle. We found each other, Blake corrected gently, at a time when we both needed healing. Edward nodded, his strength visibly fading. May I see my grandson? Just once. Blake moved closer, lowering Benjamin so the old man could see him clearly. The child, unusually solemn, studied his grandfather with curious eyes. He has your mother's eyes, Edward whispered to Zara. And your spirit, I think. Teach him. Better than I taught you. We will, Zara promised, her heart breaking for what might have been for the relationship that should have existed between this grandfather and grandson. Edward closed his eyes, seeming to gather his last reserves. I'm proud of you, Zara, for your courage, for your integrity, for building a life from the ashes of what I destroyed. His voice faded to a whisper. I was wrong about so many things, but I was right about you. Always. They stayed with him until the end came peacefully an hour later. As they left the prison, walking into the bright Boston afternoon, Zara felt a weight lifting, not completely gone, but lighter than it had been in years. Are you all right? Blake asked, shifting Benjamin to his other arm so he could wrap the free one around her shoulders. Yes, Zara answered truthfully. Not happy exactly, but peace. He acknowledged his wrongs. That's more than I expected. They walked in silence for a while, passing the fashionable streets where Zara had once been welcomed in every home. A few passers-by recognized her, their expressions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Do you miss it? Blake asked, noticing her gaze lingering on an elegant townhouse. This life, the society, the culture. Zara considered the question seriously. I miss certain aspects. The libraries, the concerts, the intellectual discussions. She squeezed his hand. But I would trade them all again for what I've found with you. For our home, our life together. Blake's smile was understanding. Perhaps we could bring a bit more of the East to Broken Creek. Proper library, maybe even a piano. Benjamin should grow up with music and books as well as horses and open skies. The generous offer so characteristic of the man she had married filled Zara with warmth. I would like that. A blending of both worlds. As they continued toward their hotel, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From privileged banker's daughter to social outcast. From solitary traveler to beloved wife and mother. From shame to honor. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led her to where she belonged. To a man who saw her true worth. To a life built on integrity rather than appearances. That evening, as Benjamin slept peacefully in the hotel's crib, Zara and Blake stood by the window overlooking Boston Harbor. Ship's lights twinkled on the dark water, reminding Zara of the stars over Montana, different, yet equally beautiful in their way. "When do you want to head home?" Blake asked, his arms encircling her from behind. "Tomorrow, if possible," Zara replied. "I've made my peace with Boston, with my father, with the past." Blake turned her gently to face him. "Any regrets?" Zara reached up to trace the scar on his face, the mark that had initially hinted at his own difficult journey. "Only that it took us so long to find each other." "Some treasures are worth the wait," Blake murmured, lowering his lips to hers. In his kiss, Zara tasted the promise of their shared future, the ranch that would grow and prosper, the family that would expand, the love that had transformed them both from wounded souls to partners in every sense. When they broke apart, Blake rested his forehead against hers. "I'm proud of you, Zara Calloway. Proud to be your husband. Proud of the strength it took to face your father today." He said something at the end, Zara remembered, about being right about me, even though he was wrong about everything else. "The one true judgment he made," Blake agreed. "Seeing your worth, even if he didn't honor it properly." Zara smiled, genuine contentment washing through her. "Take me home, Blake. Back to Montana. Back to our life." "Nothing would make me happier," he replied, sealing the promise with another kiss. 3 days later, they boarded the westbound train, Benjamin babbling excitedly at the new experience. As Boston receded behind them, Zara felt no sadness, only anticipation for the future they were building together. The journey west was like traveling back through time, from the refined civilization of the East to the rawer, newer world of the frontier. Yet this time, Zara didn't feel she was escaping or running away. She was simply returning where she belonged. When they finally crested the rise overlooking Broken Creek Ranch, the sight of home brought tears to her eyes. The ranch house stood proud against the backdrop of mountains, smoke curling invitingly from the chimney. Mrs. Peterson and the ranch hands had gathered on the porch to welcome them back. A hand-painted banner proclaiming, "Welcome home Calloways," hung across the entrance. "Look, Benjamin," Blake said, pointing. "That's home." As if understanding, the child clapped his hands and bounced in Zara's arms, recognizing the place even after their absence. James, his leg long healed, rode out to meet them. "Welcome back, boss. Madam. Everything's in order, better than order, in fact. That new irrigation system Miss Zara designed before you left is working better than anyone expected." Pride swelled in Zara's chest. Her engineering plans, initially met with skepticism by some of the older ranch hands, had proven their worth. "And the school?" she asked eagerly. James grinned. "Up to 15 students now. 3 new families moved into the valley after word spread about Reynolds' conviction. They're all sending their young uns. Mrs. Peterson's niece has been teaching in your absence, but she says the children miss you something fierce." Blake helped Zara down from the wagon, then lifted Benjamin. "It's good to be home," he said, surveying his domain with satisfaction. "The best kind of good," Zara agreed, linking her arm through his as they walked toward the house where their future waited. 5 years later, Zara stood in the doorway of the newly built schoolhouse, watching as 24 children of various ages bent over their lessons. Benjamin, now 6, was helping a younger child with his letters, showing the same patience and leadership that marked his father. The settlement that had grown around Broken Creek Ranch could no longer be called merely a ranch. It had become a community, Calloway Creek, according to the new sign at the crossroads. Nearly 30 families now called it home, drawn by the fertile land, fair water rights, and sense of safety that had been established. "How are the scholars today?" Blake asked, appearing beside her with their 3-year-old daughter Eliza perched on his shoulders. "Thriving," Zara replied with pride. "Young Michael Preston has a real gift for mathematics, and Sarah Williams has written a composition that would impress any Eastern schoolmarm." Blake set Eliza down, and she immediately ran to join the other small children at the back of the room where they practiced their letters under the supervision of Zara's assistant teacher. "I just got word from Helena," Blake said quietly. "The territorial legislature approved our petition. Official township status will be granted next month." Zara's eyes widened. "Really? After all the opposition from the big cattle interests?" Blake grinned. "Turns out having the territorial governor's wife as a childhood friend has its advantages. Your letter to Rebecca was apparently quite persuasive." "That's wonderful news." Zara felt a surge of satisfaction. Township status meant more resources, better protection, and official recognition of what they had built together. "Mayor Calloway has a nice ring to it," Blake teased. Zara raised an eyebrow. "Is that an announcement of your candidacy, Mr. Calloway?" "Heaven forbid. I'll stick to ranching. James is the one with political ambitions." Blake took her hand. "Though the founder's wife would make an excellent school superintendent when the territory establishes an official position." The suggestion caught Zara by surprise. "Me? An official position? Why not? You've built this school from nothing. Every child in the valley can read and cipher because of you. Half the adults, too, thanks to your evening classes." Pride warmed Zara's heart as she surveyed the schoolroom. From the well-made desks to the small library in the corner, stocked with books Blake had ordered from Boston. This place represented everything she had hoped to achieve when she'd first accepted that teaching position in Helena, a position she had never reached, as fate had other plans. Better plans, as it turned out. "I'll consider it," she said, squeezing Blake's hand, "though I already have quite enough occupations as wife, mother, ranch manager, and teacher." "You've always excelled at everything you attempt," Blake reminded her. "Just one of the many reasons I love you." His words, spoken with the same warmth and admiration as when they'd first married, still had the power to make Zara's heart beat faster. 7 years together had only deepened their connection, their shared vision for this place and their family. That evening, after the children were asleep, Zara and Blake sat on the porch swing, enjoying the cool night air. The ranch house had expanded over the years, now boasting 2 stories, additional wings, and modern conveniences that would have been unimaginable when Zara first arrived in Montana Territory. Yet they still spent most evenings here, watching the sunset and talking about their day. "I received a letter from my brother today," Blake said, his arm around Zara's shoulders. "Daniel's coming for a visit next month. Says he's eager to see how his wild older brother has become a respectable family man and community founder." Zara smiled. "I like Daniel, and the children adore their uncle. He asked about you specifically." Blake's voice held a note of pride. "Says the Edward Thornwood case is still discussed in Eastern legal circles as a landmark example of financial fraud prosecution. Your testimony is studied by law students." "Is it?" Zara was surprised. "I hadn't realized. Your father's crimes were enormous in scope. The case changed banking regulations." Blake kissed her temple. "Your courage had far-reaching consequences you never imagined." Zara contemplated this, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. "It's strange to think that the most painful chapter of my life became something positive for others." "Not so strange," Blake disagreed gently. "Isn't that what we've built here? Something positive from painful beginnings." He was right, of course. Blake had come west after losing his parents and family home in the war, carrying both visible and invisible scars. Zara had fled Boston in disgrace, bearing the weight of public condemnation. Yet together, they had created something beautiful: a family, a community, a legacy. "Do you ever wonder how differently things might have turned out?" Zara asked. "If my stagecoach hadn't been attacked? If you hadn't found me?" Blake considered this. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some connections are meant to be." "The romantic rancher," Zara teased, though she was touched by his sentiment. "Guilty as charged." Blake smiled, then grew more serious. "When I first saw you behind that wagon, gun drawn, refusing to surrender despite impossible odds, something in me recognized something in you. A matching spirit, perhaps. I was terrified," Zara admitted, "but determined not to show it. You never have shown fear, even when you've felt it." Blake's voice was admiring. "Whether facing bandits, Reynolds, your father's legacy, or the challenges of building a life here, you've always moved forward with courage." Zara leaned her head against his shoulder. "Only because I haven't faced anything alone since meeting you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch's distant cattle, the soft nickering of horses in the stable, the creak of windmills Blake had installed to supplement the creek water. "Calloway Creek," Zara mused, testing the name of their new township. "It has a fine sound to it." "Indeed it does." Blake's voice held satisfaction. "Though I still think Thornwood would have been equally appropriate. This community exists because of both of us." "Perhaps," Zara acknowledged, "but I prefer being Zara Calloway to any other name now. I've worn it proudly these 7 years." Blake turned to face her, his expression earnest in the fading light. "When you first arrived here, you told me you'd been shamed too long. And you said you would give me honor," Zara remembered softly. "Have I?" Blake asked. "Have we built the life you hoped for when you agreed to stay?" Zara considered the question, thinking of their thriving ranch, their beautiful children, the community that respected them both, the love that had only deepened with passing years. "No," she answered truthfully, seeing momentary concern flash across Blake's face before she continued. "We've built something far better than anything I could have hoped for or imagined then." Relief and love transformed Blake's expression. He leaned forward to kiss her, the tenderness of it conveying all the emotions words couldn't fully express. When they separated, Zara rested her hand against his cheek, her thumb tracing the scar that had once seemed so prominent but now was simply part of the beloved face she woke to each morning. "I came west seeking only escape and anonymity," she said softly. "Instead, I found purpose, community, love. And I found the partner I never knew I was seeking," Blake replied. "The woman who made Broken Creek Ranch into a home, and now into the heart of a community." Above them, stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their growing love, their marriage, the births of their children, and the building of their community. Under that vast Montana sky, they had both found what they truly sought. Not just honor after shame, but belonging after isolation, purpose after loss, and love after loneliness. As Blake pulled her close again, Zara knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be, not despite the difficult path that had led her here, but because of it. Every challenge, every loss, every moment of shame and judgment had ultimately guided her to this man, this family, this community, this life. And as the evening deepened around them, Zara and Blake Calloway sat together on their porch, the founders of Calloway Creek, the builders of a legacy that would endure long after them, a legacy of integrity, justice, and love that had transformed not just their own lives, but an entire corner of the Montana frontier. "I love you, Blake Calloway," Zara whispered into the gathering darkness. "And I love you, Zara Calloway," he answered, his voice a promise that had been kept through years past and would continue through all the years to come, until the stars fall from the sky.